Okay, well, we're going to get started. These talks are rapid fire, so hopefully we can get them all in, get some questions in. But the first one basically is going to be challenging in large-scale organic operations. Now, some of you guys might be just a couple of acres, but eventually you might want to expand, and you need to know what the complexities of that might be. We got Miss Logan Petrie. Yep, is from Grimway Organics, and she's going to talk to us about those challenges. So I'm going to let you take over.
Good morning. All right, so yes, I'm Logan Petrie, Lincoln Hoger. I'm with Grimway Farms, organic farm manager. I've been an organic farm manager for now about, I think it's going on 9 years. And so Grimway Farms, just a brief intro to that. It's a California company. It's the largest organic vegetable producer in the country and the largest organic carrot producer in the world. And so I manage just the southeast production, which is not as many acres. We're looking at about 2,000 though. So I mean, this is large scale. This is kind of what I've, been over. So I know it is kind of different from that side. But I'm also on the National Organic Standards Board and on the board chair for Florida Organic Growers. Okay, so when we're talking about, and this may be also catered toward large-scale organic or conventional growers that want to transition. All right, so I'm going to kind of talk about both. The main mindset that you really need to change when you're transitioning from conventional, I think, after all these years, is weeds. Weeds is very, very difficult. There are no effective organic chemical controls. There are some on the market. You can use some to spray. But as far as in season, when you're shifting from conventional to organic, you don't have any selective herbicides. There are none. Most of them are soaps. They're salts. So they're going to burn everything that you spray on top of it. So you have to really change that mindset. Also, if you're small and you're going to large, you've got to think about the labor that it costs, the labor that it takes. 40 hours per acre is kind of just a rough estimate. That can change, depending on your field, depending on the cropping system, how much can you till through the field. You can see this is a tiny little 2-row machine, 4-row machine. I mean, you're talking about very small equipment. Your speeds change, so the amount of acres per hour you're getting can vary. So if you're covering a lot of acres, it's going to be a lot of time that you're spending in the field. We're in the southeast, we get a lot of rain. The way you kill weeds is that you're trying to desiccate weeds. So it really depends on the environment whether you're going to have an effective control or not. So when you're only working with 3 days of working time compared to West Coast that may get 7 days a week where they can get it done, that does change. So you're looking at labor as well. So having crews available. I mean, this might actually help you in conventional. If you're a conventional farmer, transitioning to organic, or you have some that you're going to have organic because it may help your sales. Maybe this is something that your crew can do on the side between harvest days or something. So that may actually be a good fit for you. But if you're scaling up from being a small grower, the weed management is going to be a heavy input for you. You're also going to see weed shifts. So conventional growers, they complain about nutsedge, they complain about pigweeds, they complain about other things that we really don't. Pigweeds do not frighten me at all as an organic grower because they're easy to pull. And you're like, no, they're not, Logan. They're this tall. We don't let them get this tall. We're pulling them when they're about that big. They're actually pretty easy to pull. That's when you got to get them. When weeds are very small, if you're going to hand pull. So we saw a weed shift from very tall, or from the heavily seeded weeds like the pigweeds, to low-growing weeds. So we were at first just pulling them out of the ground. Now you're on your hands and knees pulling up purslane, pulling up carpetweed. You're pulling up cudweed, primrose, all the low-growing things that stay shielded underneath the plant canopy. So you see weed shifts. Another weed shift, we don't see nutsedge. That doesn't frighten me either because that actually is easy to control with tillage, with covering the ground, which you have to do in organics. Grass is what we see in organics becoming a problem. Now, conventional guys, they can spray. They have lots of grass herbicide options. You don't have that in organics. obviously. So you're pulling. It's a vegetative reproduction. So those are always difficult to pull. Also, a lot of growers are using plastic mulch. Now, with conventional, a lot of times you see second year, or third season, of plastic mulch. And organics, from the people I've talked to, 1 year and done. So that's a pretty expensive input for just 1 year. The reason is you don't have the herbicides to be able to kill in all of where the plastic has been damaged. So it's definitely a different shift mindset for that. Okay, so just coming to Savannah, you could find these fields all over the place because it's winter, right? And we just wait until we plant the next cotton crop or the peanut crop or whatever that is. This is just a fallow field. You cannot do this in organics, so you have to keep the ground covered, you have to keep equipment in, otherwise all of these seeded plants are going to choke you out. You just can't afford to even pull those weeds in season. So managing your fields between the seasons is very important. It's putting cover crops in. It's making sure you're in there with tillage equipment every other week, every week, depending on, the conditions. That's another problem. This is actually our field, but it is a problem. This is where the grass comes in. Problem with that grass is, it's spreading underground because it's vegetative, but it's also blowing weed seed. So grass spreads very easily. That crabgrass, if your neighbors surrounding you don't take care of your fields, you're going to have a problem. We had to surrender some fields just because we couldn't keep up with it because they were pasture fields, one field was a tomato field, plastic tomato field. And in the winter, they don't care, right? I mean, I'm not saying that they don't care about their own field, but they don't need to. Some of the conventional guys, it's fine. They can control it with grass herbicide, so it's not a serious problem for them. Serious problem for us. So we get a lot of rain. When you go in and you cultivate ground or you pull weeds, you have a tendency to just throw them on the furrow. If you get a rain, all it's going to do is reroot, be in the furrow, and cause a problem. So we've gotten to where we actually have the crew pull the weed out of the field. And at first I was like, okay, I want the whole crew, just pull the purslane. Just pull purslane. And that's just not the way that you need to have the crew. Sometimes people can't identify purslane, how can I expect the entire crew to identify only purslane? So we just said, you know what, pull everything out of the field. And it ended up helping a lot with your don't pull the crop. That's the only weed plant I need you to identify. The others, I don't care. So, because cotyledons are really hard. I mean, we have weed scientists tests on that, right? So we needed to actually get them to remove it. So yeah, you're removing a lot of dirt. You have to have trailers on your row spacing for this. You have to have a tractor designated for it because you're wanting to move it onto the trailer. So it actually takes a lot of resources to this, but this is the way you keep your field the cleanest. Adds a lot of time as well. And that was another, this was on our peanuts. We grew peanuts 1 year. We didn't have the trailers on 30 inches because that's the only crop we grew on 30 inches. So we had to pull them at the edge of the field. So you're talking about, we gave them pick buckets, just like they're harvesting a crop, sent them out to go pull the weeds. So the other area that I know that insects and fungicides are extremely important, but the other thing I wanted to make sure I got to is the crop rotations. And so you don't have the chemical toolbox to be able to control soil-borne pathogens or even pathogens that live on crop residues. So you don't have the fumigants. You don't have the powerful, in-furrow Ridomils or the azoxystrobins. You don't have those. So what are you going to rely on? You really just got to keep the inoculum down in the soil. You can't go, and even with some of our rotations that are regionally, you have squash, pepper, cucumber, tomato. It's crops that may be in different families that share the same pathogen. PCAP, for example, Phytophthora capsicum. I mean, it's terrible in our area. And so you really do have to branch out to other commodities that you're not used to growing. And that ends up causing more headache as far as sales or as far as rotation that way. So these are some of the diseases I could think of. Phytophthora pythium alternary species, which lives on crop residues. So like for broccoli, things like that. Black rot, that's on your brassicas, your crucifers. Northern corn leaf blight lives on plant residue. So if you're growing corn back to back, or you are going to get a higher disease issue. White molds, root knot nematode, sour skin, and onions. I know the Vidalia onion region, they have corn and onion. So those things, they build on top of each other with that sour skin. Also, if you're increasing from a smaller size to a larger size, you're going to increase your airborne pathogen chances too. So a lot of small farmers have barriers that, that protect them from a lot of airborne diseases that are brought in from storm. You still get them, but if you're wide open like this is our organic farm here, then your chances of getting a foliar disease are just as equal as a large conventional grower. So this is just a chart I found from APS, or I made it from the information from APS, and looking at what do we grow in our area. And these are most of the crops that we grow. And what are some of the diseases that we're looking at? If you look at, like, for example, pink root and onion, it really only is yield limiting on onions, but it harbors on so many other things. And then you have wireworm. Okay, I've tried sweet potatoes, I've tried it. I don't recommend it on a large scale. I just cannot get around wireworm because it really does just get on everything. All right, so there are some of the things, even root knot nematode, most of the crops that we're growing. Okay, so you're like, Logan, how do I rotate around that? Well, what we have found is in some things you actually don't rotate around it. So root knot nematode, for example, gets most of our crops. Can make your carrots, we do mainly carrots, completely unmarketable. It's not like a squash plant that just suffers a little bit and your yield, your fruit, you're not producing. Carrots, they get dinged by root knot nematode, you throw them away. Or you donate them to UGA for a nematode trial. I think we did that one time. Well, what we've seen in organic farm, because we're not using the fumigants, because we are doing the cover crops, because we are having the rotation, is there's a balance. So this bottom part, for some diseases, inoculum can be present in the soil. We still have nematodes in the soil, but the disease incidence is not there, or it's very small because there is a competition of microbes going on in the soil. So that is one thing that you can achieve with organics. And you need to protect it. And the way you protect it is the diverse cropping system, is the cover crops. So we're able to be probably the only people in North Florida that can grow carrots without an nematicide. And this is why. So, okay. All right. Most of you grow, if you're conventional, if you're small organic and you want to expand, you probably can grow it. That actually might not be the hardest part. It's what comes after that that can be very difficult. All right, so you have a lot of produce farmers that are conventional. They're growing corn, soybeans, cotton, peanuts. You have places to take this to. The infrastructure is built for you. The ag industry is already taking care of that side. There are businesses, there are cotton gins, there are peanut shelling points, there are peanut buying points, there are corn dryers. You can take your bulk commodity things somewhere to a co-op. We don't have this for organics. So you're gonna run into having no place to take your crop. These facilities need, if they're handling your loose product, they have to be certified. And I mean, I know the struggles of people. We don't have this infrastructure. We actually, because we had a lot of corn, we were able to find somebody with corn bins, and we were able to certify them and handle it. And they were able to handle it for us. But it was like where you had to run the organics before anything else to make sure that you didn't get GMO seed, because most of these crops on the conventional side are GMO. So you're looking at contamination potentials there. So this is going to be a struggle. It's an upward battle, and it needs to be established if you're going to have a lot of growth in organics in this industry, because those types of crops are what support the large-scale farms for conventionals as well. You also need, so if you are thinking about transitioning, you have to get your shed certified as well. So if you're in citrus or you're in veg, you need to get that done. This is SOE, the Strengthening Organic Enforcement Rule. So this is a new launch. It's happening in March, and this is making sure that everybody in the industry that handles organic product is certified. That's including people in sales. It's including brokers. There was a lot of fraud going on. This is an attempt to reduce fraud, which organic farmers should like. We should want this, but it is changing up. So if you're looking at transitioning, please look up SOE from USDA. Make sure you're covered before you invest and then don't have that outlet. So the other thing, so once you get your infrastructure, then you have your sales. And that seems to be challenging too. So you're looking, like, let's just say you are a conventional grower and you're doing the squash and you're doing the pepper and the tomato. Like we said, those aren't good rotation crops. Do you need to add the crucifers in? Do you need to add the sweet corn in? Do you need to add, what do you need to add in, and do you have sales for that? So it is a puzzle. It is hard to do. And then, is it growing? We do see consistent growth. I don't know if this 2021, again, was from COVID, because everything grew in COVID as far as the retail. But also, we look, there's a shift, like in the soybeans up there, we're seeing a shift from imports, and there is this drive to get more domestic product because of the potential fraud that's coming in from a lot of imports. That's where we're getting most of our fraud is from bringing in grains, soybean meal, corn. So there is growth potential, but the sales and the markets, they definitely need to be more established. I would say that they're easier on the commodities, but it's the infrastructure that of handling your product that is really limiting. So there's a bottleneck in all of those, and identifying where that is and tackling that is important, because you can grow it. You can grow it and you can be left with it. And so the last part is, until you establish that market and you need the rotation, there are a lot of cover crops that are in certain families that you can grow. There's plenty in the brassica family that you can add into your crop mix to build your strong farming organic program, until you can find the sales for kale or cabbage or broccoli. But you can grow a hot mustard or something like that. You can do the same thing for grasses until you can find maybe some type of seed, like oats, rye, things like that. You can grow those as cover crops. So thank you. All right.
We have some questions for Logan. We got a minute or two if y'all have a question.
When you're pulling off the weeds,
Yeah.
I see them on the edge of the field there. Are you guys composting in, put the biomass back on the field? Then
Sure.
what do you do with those?
No, we don't with the weeds. We're putting them in a pile and just letting them rot. So no, afraid to, we do have, we do get in raw chicken litter, and we have a composting system, so it doesn't meet the compost requirements of the carbon nitrogen ratio. But we do have turners, and so we are able to heat it, but putting in weeds with potential seed, I definitely don't want to load up the compost pile with that, so.
Yes,
Yes.
is that litter your main fertility source?
Yes. So we have we can use the raw source, then we heat it ourselves with the compost turner, so we're getting it to that 130 for 15 days, maintaining that to kill weed seed, to kill pathogens as well. We get it tested because we're mostly vegetable production, so just to stay on the food safety, safe side, we're doing that. Always it's always a pre-season input, so we're well within the PHI of that. But, and then in season, we're using the pasteurized chicken litter, a lot of it, actually Everlizer that's sponsoring this room, we use them. Great product, but we're also using Nature Safe. It has like a pelleted, like bone meal, feather meal, things like that. And sometimes what's hard about the litter, which is a great fertilizer, but its analysis is so low. And so if you're a conventional grower, you're used to applying 30%. You know, the things that are 30% are higher than 10% mostly. Well, you're looking at a 3% material, and so you're dealing with a lot of volume. You're dealing with a lot of bulk, and so, I mean, you're talking about, yes, you can use the kilobrews, the tenders, things like that, but you're also looking at front-end loaders, trying to, get it in a spreader, and so it's a lot of trips across the field. Putting a ton to the acre out in season, it's large volumes of doing that.
Yes, sir. Raw manure, you said 130 degrees for how many days?
131 for 15 days consecutive. 131 degrees at least for 15 days consecutive with 5 rotations. So every third day you're going in and turning the ground to aerate it, or the compost. Yes, you had a question?
Yeah. Well, did you say you were managing 2,000 acres?
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about what the labor looks like on that?
Sure. Sure. So we have we're on the H2A program. And so with that program, we're only able to have labor for 10 months of the year. So that is what we're allowed. So we work within that time frame. We have a crew that comes in prior to harvest. You're looking at about 30 people. And that is to consistently weed and transplant things. We transplant maybe, of our veg, we're only transplanting 10%, which is very small. We don't transplant any carrots. That can't be done. So we use them to transplant. So you're looking at 30 people, and then once we start harvest in November, we bring in an additional 100. So we're looking at 130 people consistently from November, December, and then we pick back up in March, April, May. Mm-hmm.
Elaborate a little bit on the carrot seeding. Do you stale bed to
Yeah, sure.
dump seeds, or are you, what's that look, are you tilling?
Sure. So carrots need very clean ground. All right, so there is a lot of push for organics, to be no-till. The regenerative ag is no-till. That is not happening in carrots and a lot of vegetable production. So we like very clean ground. We also use a lot of deep tillage, so bottom plowing. That's to bury weed seed, that's to bury some disease issues, and also to help with compaction. So you have that. We're starting out very clean. You want to bed up your ground depending on the time of the year, a couple weeks before, 2 to 3 weeks before. You may not want to put your fertilizer out. You can spread your fertilizer on top of the bed, but you want to get that bed to flush. We have seen huge weed reductions within 10 days. 10 days can make a huge difference. I'm talking about like $1,000 an acre. I mean, it can be huge in the summer because your weeds, and that's the thing, is we see actually shifts we plant carrots from August to November. You're going to see differences between that in itself. So you have a summer weed flush in August and September. You have a winter weed flush in usually October and November. We're much better at it in the summer because they flush faster than carrots. Great. Okay, so we use propane burners. I don't know if you've seen them. Okay, so we're working with kind of a sterile seed bed there. So right before the carrots come up, we're trying to go in, kill weeds. That's much harder to do during the winter weed flush because winter weeds actually germ later than carrots. So, yeah, we'd like to prep the bed completely, but we get too much rain to be able. We prefer a better bed for the whole season than we do the weeds. Now, my boss is in here, and he would not want me to say that. But weeds get very expensive, but you need a good bed the whole season to be able to say that. So, or to have that, but yeah, there's difficulties there depending on the season.
Here we go. I think we do, yeah. Okay, folks, we're going to move on to our next speaker. This is Mr. Billy Mitchell. I've met him at some other programs as well, And he's going to cover, we were talking about the changes in organics and some of the transitions that are coming up, particularly by this March. So he's going to cover some of that and some of the other opportunities that we have in the organic transition process. I'm going to let you jump right in.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, y'all, I'm so glad to be here with you this morning. We're talking about opportunities for growers. In particular, we're going to talk about some financial opportunities for growers, both certified organic growers and growers in the transition process. If you're not a grower, please take this information and share this information. There's a lot of brand new funding. It's very exciting, but it only works if we get the word out so that we can work it. I should say, thank you, I'm Billy Mitchell, and I work for Florida Organic Growers as part of the USDA's Transition to Organic Partnership Program, TOP. It's one of the many new programs. Florida Organic Growers is helping manage TOP, Transition Organic Partnership Program, in the Southeast, and these are the states and territories that we're in and our partners. So we're in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, both Carolinas, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We have around 40 informal and formal partners, so informally working with UGA, formally working with the Georgia Organic Peanut Association, but lots of resources for technical assistance, community building, and a program that we're really excited, our mentorship program. And TOP really covers 5 main things. One, which I'm going to dial into today, is this brand new farmer-to-farmer mentorship program. But there's also community building, so these are farm walks, tours, farm-to-table opportunities, technical assistance and training. So if you got a question about IPM or stale carrot beds, we've got resources. It is a USDA-funded cooperative agreement, so we're doing a lot of data collection and reporting, and then workforce training and development. Logan mentioned infrastructure needs. And so we need to make sure that we're creating an infrastructure along the entire organic supply chain to support currently certified organic farmers and farmers that are transitioning. But what we're excited about all of it, but what we're really excited to talk about today is the farmer-to-farmer mentorship program. And this is an opportunity for certified organic farmers to be paid to provide mentorship to farmers who are transitioning. And those farmers who are transitioning to becoming certified organic, so that means starting to make an organic systems plan, really moving towards that process certification, can also receive a stipend. This is exciting because that paid piece, if you're a certified organic farmer or just a farmer in general, you are most definitely already offering advice to other farmers all the time. And this is an opportunity to have that advice be financially supported. To do this program, we need to recruit 2 different groups of people, the mentors and the mentees. So if you're a certified organic farmer, as a mentor, and you can use this fancy QR code, we'll also share an email address at the end, you'll provide training, guidance, and support to farmers who are transitioning to certified organic. And as part of that process, you'll be able to receive $3,000 a year. That can go up depending on the amount of mentees that you want to have, but let's just start simple, one-on-one, just me and Kim in a mentoring relationship. The mentor would receive $3,000 a year, and applications are open. This is a brand new program. It's rolling. It has started now in January 2024. To be a mentor, you have to have a couple basic requirements. One is substantial production farming experience. If you've only been certified organic for maybe a year, we were looking for just a little bit more. We're looking for active or retired certified organic producers in good standing, or at least 3 years of experience with organic certification. Really, so that way, you've kind of gone through it for a wet year, a dry year, and a really good year. Like, you really have this deep understanding of putting the practices in place, but then also what that certification process feels like, what that record keeping feels like. And then just also ask that you're fluent in the language if you're a mentee. So if your mentee speaks English, we ask that you're comfortable speaking English. If your mentee speaks Spanish, or that's their main language, that you're also comfortable speaking that language. And to be in this program, to receive that stipend, there are some expectations. It's going to be about 45 hours a year. Some of that is covered in travel time. You'll get to visit your mentor or your mentee's farm. Some of that's definitely just covered in the meetings, being in meetings with your mentee, but also being in meetings with program staff, doing check-ins, and then creating this mentor-mentee agreement, where you sit down with your mentee and you say things like, I like to talk over email or never email me. You can text me, but if you call me, I won't pick up. Just really basic communication things, but also working with your mentee, like, what do you want to learn this year? And what can I really teach you the best? And maybe things that you don't know, you can say, well, we've got technical assistance options through TOP to connect you. So as a mentor, you don't have to know everything, it's always okay just to say, I don't know, but we can connect you to people who do. And a really exciting part of it is visiting your mentee's farm. And this can be done virtually depending on distance, weather, et cetera, and then having the mentee come out to you and just walk around. And the nice thing is that this is financially supported. So if you have one mentee, it's $3,000 a year. There's also different types of mentorship. You can do group mentorship, where you're mentoring a group of farmers, and you can see there's a different payment structure there. It's $4,000 per group of 2, and another $1,000 after that. Or if you're like really feeling it, or maybe you're retired, because this is going to take time, you can do multiple one-on-one mentee relationships. So there's a lot of different options. Also going through this pretty quick in a 20-minute presentation today. But if you're interested, please talk to me. We have other Florida Organic Grower staff up here, and we'll share the email afterwards. But this is a brand new program. It's fully funded, and we're just really excited to roll this out in the Southeast. So those are our mentors. You're receiving $3,000 a year. You love to share organic information, but the mentors also need a mentee. So maybe you want to be a mentee. You're a transitioning producer. The big thing here is our program is called the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. So to be a mentee, you really have to be focused on transitioning to organic, and part of that is either adapting or creating an organic systems plan. There's a bunch of different ways to show that, and so if you're interested in this program and you're interested in transitioning to organic, one, you could go to this QR code. You can also take down the email address later or talk to me after this session. But the nice thing is you'll also be able to be supported. So in this program, you can receive up to a $500 educational stipend per year. So this educational stipend, it can't go to seeds or to tractor implements, but what could go to is supporting your time coming to a conference like this, going to a Georgia Organics workshop, going to a CFSA workshop. Using this educational stipend, even when workshops are free, there's still the cost of your time, mileage, food, childcare. This stipend helps support the cost of being able to go to conferences, workshops, so you can gain knowledge and hopefully go with your mentor and have a really nice co-learning experience. There's also some other expectations like meeting with staff, making that agreement, and then doing those on-farm visits. This mentorship program, I'll just say it again, it's brand new, but it is really exciting because we have a lot of connections to technical service providers to let you know about chemicals, record keeping, IPM, but now you can be connected with a mentor to know just like that lived experience. Like I don't really totally even understand what Logan was saying about Thanksgiving came early this year. That has something to do with the calendar, I think. But I think another farmer probably knew exactly what you were saying, and that's what this mentorship is about, is really talking to people who have lived through the experience. I can give a lot of advice about paperwork, but I haven't lived that experience of like crunching the paperwork out at midnight while eating dry cereal, stressed because your inspectors come the next day. This mentorship opportunity is a really great chance for all of us to learn together. So that's the big opportunity through the TOP program. There are a couple other USD opportunities that we wanted to talk about that provide financial support. One is the FSA. A lot of y'all probably know about the Organic Certification Cost Share Program. This is up to 75% of your certification costs, $750 maximum. So once you're going through certification, you can work through FSA. But there's also a couple other programs I don't hear talked about a lot, like assistance to establish conservation buffer zones, or assistance for crop losses due to natural disasters. In particular, with the insurance, if you're a new, traditionally underserved, or limited resource farmer, you're eligible for free catastrophic coverage and discounted premiums. So if you're organic, this is just one of the other options. And then our good friends at the NRCS have also some brand new support. And so if you're talking to your NRCS agent, kind of learn to talk like the USDA employees. So there's a couple numbers that you want to know, the 823 and the 138. So there's this new organic management practice, the 823. There's not a ton of information about there yet, but you should engage with your NRCS agent about it. In particular, it provides technical support, and then USDA has used this very vague language, sizable financial incentive. They have not defined what that sizable financial incentive is, but this is a brand new program. And if you're organic or thinking about transitioning to organic, the 823. There's also 138, the conservation plan supporting organic transition. Here again, you'll get technical assistance. And part of what you'll get is making this resource inventory and the supplement, and this contains required components of your organic systems plan. So working through NRCS, you can receive cost share assistance and financial assistance to help really move forward. To transition to organic, you're going to need an organic systems plan. That paperwork piece that Howard might talk about a little bit after this. So these are brand new things. The 823, 138's been around for a while, but the 823 is brand new. Your agent might be learning along with you. That's okay. That's a good opportunity to learn. And the last is the NRCS EQIP. To be eligible, it's certified organic, exempt from certification, or transitioning to organic. And I really want to focus on this last one. If you're transitioning to organic, it says self-certify and agree to develop and work towards implementing an organic systems plan. And that's a very similar requirement to being a mentee in the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. So please think about using this whole suite of resources. USDA has really stepped up to provide support for organic and transitioning to organic farmers around technical assistance and just building a stronger community of farmers. And so especially if you're a citrus farmer thinking about transitioning to organic, or maybe you're a certified organic diversified vegetable grower who's been in questions for years and you like to get paid to answer those questions, this is a really good opportunity to be a part of a mentorship program. So that's the USDA top support. Well, there's one last thing. And then there's this opportunity now to be certified transitional as you're transitioning. You can work through different certifiers. This is not me promoting one certifier or another. This is not every certifier in the country, but you can receive a certification that shows that you're certified transitional. It involves an organic systems plan. You kind of go through the same review as certified organic. What's nice is you might be able to receive a premium price by being able to show buyers, I'm taking the steps to be certified organic. We see that demand is going up, so talking to your buyer, showing that you're taking those steps, but it also really helps provide an easy stepping stone to certified organic. You're really learning the systems, you're learning the processes. It gives you an opportunity to be prepared for your first full-on inspection. As of right now, these are not listed in the Organic Integrity Database, but you are able to get certain labels and you will be able to show that you do have this certification. And these are also kind of brand new things. And so thinking about just reach out to different certifiers if this is something that you're interested in, or reach out to us at the Transition to Organic Partnership Program at Florida Organic Growers, and we can really walk you through this process. It's very exciting. The last for this presentation exciting thing is, Kim, if you want to come up and talk about the Climate Smart project.
Thanks, Billy. Hello all, I am Kim Blitz and I'm with Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. We are a partner in this project with Rodale, the Southern Piedmont Climate Smart project. As Billy has said, there is a lot of opportunity right now and a lot of funding coming in specifically from the USDA. This opportunity in our project, as you've probably heard from several sources, there are a lot of climate smart projects going on right now. Ours is a research project that's kind of focusing on cover cropping specifically. So our project allows us to enroll 2 to 10 acres. We are accepting 1 to 10 acres. And the way that we're setting up the project is we're looking at soil health, we're looking at carbon sequestration and reducing our greenhouse gases. And what we're looking to do is business as usual model and a specific rotation and cover crop rotation. So, for example, if we have let's just say 2 acres enrolled in the program, 1 acre would be that business as usual, still following the same kind of planning and succession, and then our model where we'll do specific cover crop and specific plant. There are a lot of great cash incentives and non-cash incentives. So for the cash incentives, in your enrolled acreage, both the business as usual and our way, the Rodale way, the project way, it's $1,500 per acre per year. Along with that, we also have up to $220 per acre with a cap at $1,100 for inputs. And then we have a couple different things that we're going to be doing. We're working with the Comet Planner through USDA, so reporting through that. Also focus group participation, so we are looking for farmer mentors who can help us through the project and give us advice on those successions, the different cover crops. This project runs from Virginia all the way through Alabama in that Piedmont region, and that's 64,000 square miles, and it's a plateau between the Appalachian and the coastal plain. So if we have farmers who are within that region, love to talk to you. We're looking for 50 organic farmers and 50 conventional farmers to participate in the study. So we're looking to show that, diversified vegetable farmers, small diversified vegetable farmers can make a difference in the greenhouse gas and also the carbon sequestration. And we're going to try and prove that through our research over a period of 4 years. We're going to have some variety change focus groups. And the one thing I really like about this project is it's looking at the whole picture. So there's kind of two parts. We have the farming piece of it where we're going to gather that data, and we also have the market piece for that. So are our consumers buying into the climate smart farming practices and commodities grown using those practices? So it's kind of nice that it's a complete model to form that picture. Non-cash incentives, cash crop seed, cover crop seed, the use of equipment, and of course technical assistance. So for Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, I am one of the technical assistance providers along with my colleague and Amelia, and we would be out to help you. So if it's something that you've never done before in cover cropping, we're here to help to make that happen. And one of the nice things about the program, the equipment that we have to use, so no-till drills, no-till transplanters, termination of cover crop with either a flail mower or a roller crimper, all those will be provided. So it's a really unique program. Mara and I are here. Mara's from Rodale. We have some brochures. We have some business cards. We'll be mingling about the conference for the next day and a half. So any questions, feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to talk to you. Thank you.
We're almost done, Bob, I promise. Okay. So I just want to end with this email address and this QR code again for the mentorship program, and just say, if you're a certified organic farmer, retired, or currently, and you're interested in mentor, we'd love to hear from you. If you're transitioning, we would love to hear from you. But also, if you just have growers in your network, there's a grower that's always getting called with all those questions, let them know that there's now opportunities to be supported. And we're thankful that USDA has really recognized this need and has provided this generous funding. So if your name's Demetrius and you think you might be a great mentor, or your name is Howard, you might be a great mentor, it would just be good to talk after the session. And with that, I will pass the mic. Thank you, Bob.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Howard Burke. I am co-founder and president of Ellijay Mushrooms. We're up in North Georgia in Ellijay. We just grow mushrooms, and we grow a lot of them. We are certified organic. We're CCOF organic, and I'll go through the slides a little bit kind of quick, but also we'll get to a Q&A session with it too. Really on our organic journey, we're trying to figure out, is it worth it? That's the question a lot of us wonder when we transition. Is it worth it going through all the hassle or the paperwork and everything else to go on this journey? So one thing what we did is we try to figure out, is there a market for organic mushrooms that we can definitely get into and kind of get a niche? Currently, before we got started, most of the mushroom farms were up in Pennsylvania, and we wanted to figure out where we could fit in, provide a better, healthier mushroom that is closer to the markets that we deliver. Currently, we grow in greenhouses, nothing very high tech at the very beginning. The greenhouses are pretty much kind of like greenhouses that y'all grow in, where you kind of just crank up the sides of the greenhouses, let fresh air in. Hopefully you got the temperature right. Being rural, one of the things that one of our challenges with heat, so we kind of have to use the sun. Also, just recently we were working with Kennesaw State University, and we have one of their 40-foot smart containers that will grow 26 different types of mushrooms being the happiest place on earth for that particular mushroom. And we'll get to a slide about that here in a few minutes. Currently, we're growing about 5,000 pounds of organic shiitake mushrooms. I brought some examples up here. These are our oyster mushrooms. We're growing about 1,500 pounds a week of those. And lion's mane is something that we're starting to get into. This is a picture of the smart container. You can kind of see all those fancy hoses. Everything in this room is remote controlled to make sure that everything is optimal for growing. But going organic in the mushroom business is kind of tricky. And it's a choice that we decide to make because we see that there's a market out there and customers are starting to adapt going organic compared to conventional. We went through Georgia Organics during COVID. We were part of the one of the programs to get certified, and we went with CCOF to get certified during that time. When you have to do organics for mushrooms, you start looking at like the different techniques, the different substrate. And the substrate is an example of what your mushrooms are made out of, or what your seed is, so to speak, of what it's going to grow on. This is some new technology that we're starting to work with Kennesaw State University on figuring out what type of different ag waste that we can use to start growing more effective, better, lower input costs to grow mushrooms. Meaning that, do we use sawdust? Do we use peanut shells? What of these items can we use that will keep us certified organic? So you can definitely grow mushrooms on cottonseed trash, but then you have a problem with the waste left over. We want to keep our circle tight, meaning that anything that we grow, that we want to be able to turn it into compost later for the vineyards or other farmers as well. So right now we're currently going through many tests. So the majority of what we use right now is we use sawdust. So we have a sawdust machine that breaks down the trees down to 0.3 millimeters to 0.5 millimeters so that the surface is not too big like what tree companies do, shredding it that way. Those are too big to grow mushrooms on. So you really need it to be nice and tight so that the mycelium, which is the seed, so to speak, of your mushroom, so it's like your tomato seed is the mycelium, it's the white stuff. So when you're outside doing chores or even on the farm and you pick up something and you see something white like that, that is mycelium, some other different type of mushroom. They first called it the Wood Wide Web. It's like the first internet because mushrooms are decomposers, and you would think that we would have trees piled up to the sky. But once they fall down, mycelium starts attacking it and then breaks it down to make the amazing fertile soil for us to grow our crops on. We've been doing some testing with soybeans, sunflower hulls, some different types of bran. But then again, some of these parts are hard to get the substrate from organic farms. There's not too many organic cotton growers, but when we get a chance to, we've done tests on those and the results have been really good. Soybean is good. Peanut hulls are amazing to grow oyster mushrooms on. Also, different types of mushrooms need a different type of substrate, so they all need a different pH. It's kind of like your tomatoes need a different type of soil than maybe some of your kale. So those things have to be adjusted based upon what you're growing. This is our smart container. This is the only fancy that we have at the farm. This is a great place for us to test out some of our new organic mushroom breeds. We're starting to test out maitake, and that's a different whole, I guess, different avenue on the different substrates that we're doing to come up with the organic mushroom growing. One of the biggest challenges with growing organically, at least in the mushroom world, is the traceability. The paperwork is, initially it's very daunting. I thought it was a big scary monster, and it's really not when you look at it. So it becomes habit. We've set up things for our crew that on Google Docs, so that every day when we go through the 30 to 100 things we have to check off, we make it relatively easy that we can do it when we're in the different greenhouses, when we're in the different coolers, so that we can have all of our traceability. So you see our big sawdust pile right here. My partner Megan's looking at our oyster logs in there to make sure everything's growing properly. We don't use any chemicals or pesticides at all. Everything we grow on is animal-free, pesticide-free. The only thing that you might find in one of our greenhouses, let me go back here, is this yellow sticky tape. Our biggest pest is fungus gnats. That is our weed, so to speak. When I was hearing her talk about the weeds, I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, so many weeds, I couldn't even imagine like facing that every day. For us, we have different challenges. Really, the part for, I guess, our weed is contamination. So when we're creating the mushroom log or the substrate, that is, I guess, in reference to being our weed, where we could get contamination in a whole container and it can wipe out that whole crop and then set you back for 30 days. So when we create our substrate, for example, for this lion's mane, it's about 30 days before this product is ready to be put into the fruiting chamber. So if we miss any of the steps along the line, or if we get a contaminant because we're not following our SOP, then we will run into an issue where we're delayed on product for maybe it could be 2 to 3 weeks if everything got contaminated. So we're very careful on following all of our procedures and paperwork, going through the steps to create our substrate. References getting your fields and crops ready to go. This is some type of the equipment that we use to create and compress our mushroom logs. But really, that was kind of like a highlight of it. But for us, one of our biggest challenges being organic is educating the public. A lot of people really don't care about organics. But as we try to teach them why it's better, we're starting to see more adaption in that area. For us, one of our biggest challenges is that we can harvest mushrooms every day. So we have to sell our product every week. So instead of crop planning for a season organically, we have to make sure that we have organic buyers weekly and that they will depend on us. If for like last week we had a big issue with our oyster mushrooms and we were shorting our vendors. So hopefully that they need the product anyhow, so they'll go somewhere else on the market to get the product. And hopefully they come back to us the following week, you know, knowing that we have that relationship. It's one of the things I've noticed, or compared to like traditional farming with carrots, so to speak, that you have a season for that crop. Our biggest challenge is always finding a home and then continuing to find a home and then planning how you increase your production so that you can pay all your bills, finding organic homes. We recently just got into Ingles, and Ingles is not traditionally known for organics. But when we met with the buyers, we set up a kind of a low-risk challenge for them in trying to bring on a couple of our organic products as well as our conventional products. And to their surprise, and ours a little bit as well, is that people are buying more organics at Ingles than they were before. So working with different vendors or different wholesalers and trying to make a pitch to them, showing that you're having some skin in the game and we'll take a risk with them to show them that people are looking for these products when they traditionally wouldn't want that. It's just something that, you know, as you go to market your organic products, it's worth the risk to take a different angle to go at it. Getting back to paperwork for organics and getting certified, CCOF is a yearly inspection, but they come inspect all of your records, everything from your sales of organic to who it goes to, your traceability. You have to have a recall plan in place, and just coming up with a good foundation of structure of what you do every day before you go into the field or into the greenhouses of checking all the steps to make sure everything's in place and there's no issues has really been key for us to keep sane and moving forward and continuing our CCOF certification. One of the other big problems is logistics. So we're in North Georgia. We get requests to sell our stuff down in Florida, but if it's only 50 pounds, how are you going to get it there? Is it worth it? So trying to build your organic network or your audience in your area. So Atlanta is pretty close to us, only an hour and a half south. We also have Tennessee and Asheville area. So it's going into those areas, finding out other wholesalers, restaurants, smaller grocery stores to find out who's looking for organics. We also talk to other farmers and collab with them and find out if we can sell our mushrooms at their farm stand or through their CSA. And I know there's other rules that are trying to be fixed through some of that. We work frequently with Love is Love's farm out in Mansfield, Georgia. And some of the challenges of what we'd love to see, I guess, get changed or ease is if we supply them mushrooms in bulk and they wanted to go pack them, then there's other certifications for that as well. So that's a hindrance for them to go through all that extra work to help support us in selling organic mushrooms, which is something they don't grow currently, but also something that their customers want. So there's so many rules in the organic world, which are great, but some of them, in my opinion, can be changed a little bit to help us continue to grow and continue what we're doing. The inputs keep going up and up for us, but one of the things where we're working with KSU is that finding these ag wastes that has lower cost to us, right, our lower input costs that we can still turn around and be certified organic. It's been tricky. Some of the stuff where we venture into this area, there's really no rules yet on that part of mushroom growing. So it's kind of new to organics, like the Real Organics. There's a movement for that as well. We try to get certified with them, and they haven't pulled the trigger because they don't have any historical data on how mushrooms are supposed to be grown organically. So we're trying to set the trend and pace and show them all the documentation that we currently have, and show them production, all the steps of it, all the traceability, open books, so that we could set a standard for other mushroom growers going forward. So it's something that we can start creating curriculum for, and really get this going instead of being pushed back every time. Infrastructure, one of our challenges also is power. We lost power 2 nights ago, and we don't have a generator, which would be amazing if we had a generator ferry show up. We only got really lucky because it was 32 degrees, and we opened up every refrigerator we had. If it was summertime, we'd have lost all of our product. So one of our challenges is that we have to be refrigerated through the whole supply chain, from 34 to 38 degrees. And power went out, opened everything up, 32 degrees, we made it to morning. So if it was summertime, everything would have been ruined. It would have been $20,000 loss for that week. So it's a challenge on making sure you have the infrastructure, and the way we can achieve that is by selling more. So we need to continue to find more outlets, more places to sell. So for us, it's a volume game. So the more mushrooms we sell, the chance that we have to pay all of our bills and then start getting more infrastructure. Also, what we do is we try to keep the circle closed, meaning that we have probably 5% waste, and that's plastic. So when we have our logs at the beginning, they're in plastic to start for the oysters and lion's mane. With the shiitakes, it's just straight, the log is compressed like a loaf of bread, and there's no waste in that. All of our packaging is plastic free currently. So anything that falls on the floor, all of our mushroom waste, because mushrooms are decomposers, so the greenhouses would look amazing at the beginning of the growth cycle, and 60 days later, everything's on the floor because it's all falling apart. What we do is we scoop all that up, we put it into our dump trailer, and we take it up to our compost facility. And then we're in the process of getting certified organic for our compost. I also do an ORMRI certified. And then we turn this, we make it into amazing mushroom compost that has no animal products in it. And we have a giant demand for this. One of our goals this year is to get a bagger so we can start selling it to our local ACE. A lot of the vineyards and other farmers in Atlanta and around Atlanta use our product, and they start seeing a giant difference using our mushroom compost compared to other mushroom compost. That's it. How much time do I have? 10 minutes, okay. So our crew right now, so we grow, let's say 6,000 pounds a week. It takes a crew of about 12 people. Mushrooms don't sleep, so we have to harvest every day, which is a challenge. On Christmas, we harvest 36 baskets, so we did about 1,200 pounds that day. If you leave it on the vine too long, meaning that if you leave it on the log too long, that they will go flat and become a number 2. So I heard the question earlier about do they cure on what it looks like for some of your organic product. They want your mushrooms to be nice and round and not deformed. And they all taste the same, but places are picky, which hopefully one day they'll understand that it's Mother Nature at times, you know. Things happen. They all taste the same nutritional value. Everything else is like that. I think that's pretty much it. I can open up to questions about it.
You do have
Yeah.
some questions?
Okay, so when I see mushrooms around, it's not 32 degrees, so I'm just curious, like how, normally we see them like at 50 degrees, 60 degrees, meaning in the outside like nature, so I'm surprised that you picked that.
Well, that is after harvest, I should have said. So after harvest, our range is 34 to 38. So
Storage.
yeah, storage. So right now in our greenhouses, we grow, and thank you for bringing that up. Right now we grow in our greenhouses for shiitakes. It's great to be around 65 to 70 degrees. When it's super hot out, production really slows down. When it's really cold out, since we don't have proper heat, it slows everything down. So that means we have to put out more logs to anticipate the slower growth so that we can meet our needs. Once we harvest it, then we have to put it into the cold storage all the way through. But normally you'll still see them. It's like, I guess with your tomato, once it's on the vine, it's great. When you take it off, you know, they start to, rotting.
And then your contaminants, when you're talking about in your substrate, is that like bacteria contaminants or?
It's usually trichoderma.
So what we put in the ground,
Yeah,
we use that as like trichodermas, we use that for crops.
interesting.
As a benefit.
Okay, well. And there's other different types of molds that can get into the clean room when we're inoculating our logs. So if we don't follow our SOPs and we bring something in, then everything in there can get contaminated. It's kind of scary up front. If you don't have it's like a garage laboratory. We'd love to get like a proper CDC flow hood and, you know, all that stuff to make sure that there's a smaller percentage of contamination. But right now we're kind of like converted a shipping container into a lab.
Like you need a generator too.
We do.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about just the profitability of mushroom compost. Like in comparison to mushroom production, what's the comparison in terms of profit margins for mushroom production versus just mushroom compost?
The money's in the mushrooms. You have to go, it's just a byproduct so that we can, at the very beginning, I was throwing our spent logs over the hill. And then I was like, because we didn't have money to build a facility, and then we just decided to take a risk because we knew that turning this into a byproduct, you can't grow mushrooms out of the mushroom compost because all the nutrients are gone, but you can grow plants and crops and flowers, everything else. So it's just a small piece of the business right now, but it is a piece of the business, meaning that we still have some extra money coming in from our waste. It will always be that way. It's just we can't produce enough of it to keep up with the mushroom production.
Gotcha. And so just a piggyback question on that. How much of your waste are you able to flip now? Like, how much of your waste are you actually able to profit from? Like, percentage-wise, how much of
Oh.
your waste are you tapping into?
99.5%. Yeah, everything that falls on the floor. So for our food safety, we're also Primus certified for our greenhouse, our packing house, and our harvest crew. So we need that for Whole Foods and other grocery stores. We also get GDA inspection. We get a lot of inspections that we pay for. It's expensive, and the question is it worth it? And for us, it is, because it's opened more doors for us, being certified organic, compared to not having that. It's something I was really scared of going down that path because I didn't know anything about it. I thought it was daunting. It still is at times, but we have a good team which helps us go through all the paperwork and keeps us on track. Our big Primus inspection's coming up at the end of the month, and our certification CCOF organic is coming at the beginning of February. But they could come anytime. The paperwork's there. Yes, sir, in the back.
Yes, sir, you said you lose a lot of the nutrients in your mushroom compost, so the compost is, the organic farmer is good to have the compost create good soil structure, more so that it gives you more nutrients in the soil.
Yeah, so the compost, the byproduct after our mushrooms, and that's also including like any of the mushrooms that fell on the floor, anything that got slimy, anything from like the stems, if we have to take stems off, we put all that up to that facility, and it breaks down. And the nutrients, we send our soil, our compost to UGA to get an analysis done, and the pH levels are great, if that's what you're asking for. So there's great nutrients inside that mushroom compost that when our farmer friends use it, they show us comparisons that their crops are this tall compared to this tall based upon that compost. Yes, sir?
Yeah, so outside of the paperwork and other things like that, like certifying the facility, what's the big difference between how you grow a mushroom conventionally and organic?
There's really not a difference. For us, we don't have any pesticides that we spray on it. I'm not for sure what they do up in Pennsylvania for like the creminis and portobellos. I know they used to use a lot of animal manure, but now they're using a synthetic base now for the substrate. For us, it's just really the inputs that we put in there. It's what we use as our, so to speak, our seed, our base, whether it's the sawdust, peanut hull shells, wheat bran, those type of things.
How do you control the fungus gnats?
The what?
Fungus gnats.
Oh, we use sticky tape. It's this, where is it? It's just yellow sticky tape that we put in there, and they fly right to it. And really what it is for that part, you can see a little bit in the top right side. The other thing is just keeping clean. So we want to make sure that we sweep up the greenhouses every day after we harvest, because we're in the business of everything's going to fall on the floor, everything's going to decompose, and it's wet. So we put the watering system, each house will get watered 15 minutes a day throughout its life cycle. And that water and the mushrooms falling on the floor is a perfect spot for the fungus gnats. So the fungus gnats will really only affect the oyster mushrooms. They don't really affect so much the shiitake mushrooms. The oysters are a pain in the butt to grow because once they put off so much CO2, and it's like the perfect attractant for fungus gnats. Yes, sir?
The logs you grow it on, is it all pine or is it,
Hardwoods.
it's all hard?
Yeah, pines really don't grow anything mushroom-wise. Very little bit grows on pine, but all hardwood. So white oak, red oak is great. You could do stuff on some sweet gum. We've not had much success with apple wood, but I've heard stories that it works. But we're all hardwoods. We are actually using some sawdust from Robinson Stave up in Blue Ridge. They make all the whiskey barrels for Buffalo Trace and all that, so we use some of their byproduct for sawdust. Yes?
I just wanted to respond back to some question. The gentleman here asked about organic versus conventional mushroom production. Some of the conventional mushroom use shouldn't be blind. It is not allowed under the organic production, so there are some changes in the inputs that you need to be cognizant of. And also in terms of guaranteed analysis, because of the mycelium, we're only harvesting the fruiting body here. The mycelium has material values. Some of the compost with guaranteed analysis from mushroom are much better than conventional.
He was saying also about some of the inputs like lime. We don't use any lime in it. You can grow oyster mushrooms with lime. Conventional growers do use lime to grow in wheat straw, which helps brings up the different properties to make it grow. But the input is the biggest challenge for us, is figuring out how we can have a lower input and a more productive log. And as we continue to kind of set the standards in the industry has been a challenge on what can be organic, because you can clean up oil waste or oil spills with organic, with oyster substrate and still eat the oyster mushrooms. Like, it can filter everything out. So there are a new frontier, so to speak, on figuring out who starts making these rules, and that's something that we're facing now on that challenge, as we try to figure out how we could take some of this extra ag waste off of these fields and start using it to grow mushrooms.
Time for maybe one more question.
Joe, in the back? Go ahead.
I just wanted to know if you could speak to the cost in terms of going organic, you know, because you said that you feel like it's worth it, but a lot of the time, the cost of becoming certified organic is just really the thing that stops producers from taking that next step.
For us, it's, we're gonna use these inputs anyways for the organic inputs, but the cost actually to pay to be certified is based upon your sales. So based upon your sales, at least for CCOF, I think other ones might be different, but this is only dealt with, is that if we sell $500,000, then we pay X amount of dollars. If we sell $1 million, then we pay X amount of dollars for the certification for them. That's just what the rules are. And I don't know where those funds go, which I've never asked. It's just one of those things is we just pay it because we kind of have to play that game, so to speak. It'd be great if it was just a fee every year. Yes, ma'am?
If you were just starting out in the industry, what are some things that you wish you had known at the very beginning that?
Whenever I talk to other farmers that want to grow, see if you have an outlet. Go find out if somebody will buy your product first. And if they are buying it, if it's going to be a restaurant, see if they have a mushroom dealer already. If they do, say, what type of mushrooms are you looking for? Try something different. Make sure you have an outlet, make sure you have a place to grow it, and then figure out early on, like, your supply chain, knowing, like, do you have a place to store it? Is the product I'm going to grow required to be cold storage? How am I going to get it there? So some of the basic things before you just go head first, just figure out if you have an audience, who that is, and then start working baby steps.
We're going to go ahead and break there, but let's go ahead and give Howard a...
Thank you.
There's probably a round where you can ask him some questions. Yeah. Probably smaller after lunch. Yeah. All right, let's go. We're going to go ahead and get rock and rolling because we're pressed for time. So our next presentation is going to be about organic peanut production. I know you guys have been through Georgia. You see the big peanut fields we have, but you may not have realized that we do actually have some organically grown peanuts. We've got a multitude of speakers for this talk today. We've got Don Cooper, Nick Basinger, and Kayla Eason, I believe, is here with us today. So we're going to turn it over to them, let them get started, and tell us about peanuts.
Sure. Well, thanks for that introduction. As Dr. Westfield mentioned, we're going to have a large group of speakers, right? So really one of the challenges that we have here is, dealing with organic peanuts. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the basics, some of the research that's already been done, and then turn it over to Kayla to talk about some of her research that's happened in this last year, and then Don will kind of back clean up and talk about GOPA and some of the work that they're doing as well. So one of the big challenges that we deal with is we have a demand for organic peanuts. Georgia's one of the largest producers of peanuts in the country, but in terms of producing organic peanuts, we're very low in acreage, right? So there are unique challenges for producing organic peanuts, not only in Georgia, but throughout the Southeast. But it could provide a really solid fit in rotation with some other organic vegetables. And we'll talk about some of the linchpin issues there as well. So in terms of some of the rotational things that you should consider, Logan talked a little earlier about some of the disease issues that are problematic. Some of the same problems that you see in vegetables you're going to have in peanuts. But in terms of some of the rotational things that peanuts should follow, things like sweet corn, sweet potatoes are good, and then small grains can also be good. But again, you know, there are some challenges working in some of these other vegetable crops. In terms of prevention, again, Logan mentioned earlier about planting in the fields and dealing with some of the issues related to weeds. Any sort of field that you have low pest pressure in, because we have a limited amount or a limited number of resources that we can deal with in terms of managing weeds and managing some of these other insect and disease pressures, you know, having fields that have low pest pressures are really important. Making sure that you scout those fields regularly, and then, you know, making sure that your inputs are weed free. That's a major thing that's important to minimize the introduction of new weed species into the field, and also minimize the movement of weed species from, you know, one field that maybe has low pest pressure to another, or high pest pressure to a field that has lower pest pressure. And then, of course, taking time to clean equipment between fields. There is the possibility of using stale seed beds, similar to a vegetable system, in peanut production, and that really is a huge benefit in this system. Peanuts are pretty resilient to things like tine weeding and even, as we'll see a little bit later, some of our organic herbicides. So, you know, just because you haven't done organic peanuts before doesn't mean that you don't necessarily have all the equipment that's necessary. There is some harvest equipment that is specific to peanuts, but in terms of some of the weed management stuff, it's pretty similar. And in some cases, you can even do things that you wouldn't ever do in a vegetable system, like use a tine weeder over top of plants that are just very tiny, right? And so another thing in terms of prevention, you know, managing those weeds. This is something that a lot of times we don't necessarily think about. A lot of times we're focused on the weeds that are specifically in the field, right? But there are things that, you know, like field edges and weeds in those waterways, or even in your around your irrigation pond. That's a big one that a lot of folks don't think about, getting into that irrigation water. And then as you're using a center pivot, it's a perfect distribution method, right? And so, you know, being able to control those weeds prior to seed development, and then use things like stale seed beds to deplete that weed seed bank. And then if you do have perennial weeds, try to target some of those propagules like rhizomes and tubers. And so, you know, we talked about some of the prevention. So prevention is the best way to keep things from getting on the farm that you don't already have. Some of the things we can do prior to and in season are things like cultural management. Has anybody ever heard of the critical period for weed control? This is like a weed science concept we talk a lot about in class, but it basically applies to vegetables, row crops, things like peanuts. So the critical period for weed control is actually the time frame in which you need to control weeds to minimize your crop loss, right? So in some cases, you don't necessarily need to control the weeds in those earliest days, right? So for us, a critical period for weed control for peanut is actually 3 to 8 weeks. So we can get away with, in conventional peanuts, you know, kind of letting it go for a few weeks, right? And we don't see a ding in yield. But But then we need to make sure that those weeds are controlled for between 3 and 8 weeks. And then after 8 weeks, usually those peanuts kind of begin to lap and they can kind of fend off some of those weed issues themselves, right? So that critical period for weed control is really important, especially in organics. And I would argue even that critical period for weed control for organics is even wider, right? Because we have fewer options to deal with some of those issues. So one of the things that's really important is variety selection. I know that with organic peanuts, there's a huge challenge in terms of seed availability, variety availability, those sorts of things. But maybe this is one of the things we're going to do at the end of this session is hear from you all, right? Where are some directions that we need to go as researchers and as members of the Georgia Organic Peanut Association? Where should we go next, right? What are some challenges that you are seeing? But seed selection, I think, is going to be one of those potentially. Getting a really vigorous variety with, with a good disease package is going to be, I think, really critical. And we see that in some of the data that Caleb will share. Other cultural things, things like planting date, row spacing and arrangement. Peanuts are a little bit weird, right? So we have single rows and then we have twin rows, right? And so some of the research previously has suggested that single rows actually a little bit easier to deal with in terms of cultivation as opposed to twin rows. So twin rows basically is the distance between from planting row to planting row is the same, and the seeding rate per acre is the same, but basically you're taking that row and you're splitting the amount of seeds that you're putting out between two hoppers, right? So it's basically sets of 2 rows in between. It's almost like a skip row type situation. And so, that row spacing and arrangement can be really critical. One of the other things is, you really want your canopy to close quickly, so, making sure that you have a good seeding rate. Sometimes with organic peanuts, we need to bump that seeding rate up just a little bit just to make sure that we really have a good stand. And then, choosing a tillage system. It was mentioned earlier that, no-till doesn't necessarily work really well in organics, right? It's possible, but there's challenges that come with that. It's the same thing here, right? So cover crops can be used, but there's sometimes challenges with termination and timing that termination. And then also if you're using cover crops and you're wanting to strip till, which is a common practice in peanut production, that cover crop can actually build up on the shank and cause a whole number of other issues. But this has been done successfully in Oklahoma with clover and wheat. And so, that may be something that we want to consider looking at here in Georgia. As I mentioned, canopy closure. And the thing with increasing your seeding rate is seeds are hard to get, but they're also very expensive. And so, making sure that you calibrate your planter, you're making sure that seeding rate is good. If you look up here, we've got a number of skips. There's a peanut there, a huge, maybe 1.5 feet, 18-inch spacing there. That's prime real estate, right? That is really prime real estate for your peanuts. And if the peanuts aren't going to take it, guess what? It's going to take it? The weeds, right? So, making sure that your planter and everything is calibrated. And then also just make sure that your plants have the best options, right? The best opportunity. So doing your soil testing, make sure that you choose a good inoculant. Make sure that it's OMRI approved. There's a lot of inoculants out there. That's a really good way to break that organic chain from the get-go, right? So untreated seed, but making sure that you do have that inoculant is going to be critical. And then making sure that you're putting out the right fertility at the right time for those peanuts. So in terms of other types of mechanical control, the tine weeder tends to be the best, right? And this is one that a lot of organic folks already kind of have floating around on the farm, as well as these duckfoot sweeps. And so the big thing with this is you've got to basically do cultivation at a weekly interval for about 6 to 7 weeks, especially from the at cracking stage. So at cracking basically is that once you plant that peanut 2.5 to 3 inches deep, that cracking stage is when it starts to push up that soil as it's coming through. You start at that stage, and then you do it almost on a schedule, based on your soil moisture every week for 6 or 7 weeks. So it can be really intensive, but grass is our main problem in organic peanuts, and so this is one way to kind of deal with that. So set a schedule and stick to it, but typically this works best when the soils are drier. If you do, nutsedge tends to be a problem. Yellow nutsedge tends to be a major problem in organic peanuts. You actually, if you are growing peanuts in general, you have a tool that can help. It's called a peanut digger. You can actually set that aside and use that as a fallow field, and use your digger once those plants come up. A lot of times those nutsedge tubers are attached to those plants, and you can actually remove them, but then you've got to go through with hand labor and collect all that stuff, right? So you may be able to figure out a way to offshoot that into some sort of trailer or something behind that, but that is a way that you can deal with it. It doesn't fix the problem, but it does cut down on the amount of population you've got. Some of the challenges with tillage, and if you are doing any sort of organic growing already in vegetables or otherwise, this already, but the weather kind of dictates the best time to do this, right? Because we're wanting those drier soils, if we get, especially some of our heavier soils, you get a rain like we've had this last week, it's a challenge, right? It's going to take a while for that to dry out. Flame weeding is great for peanuts. They actually tolerate it relatively well, even after they've already come up and they're of a decent size. But it does basically select for our grass species, right? Because that growing point of that grass, crabgrass or what have you, is below the soil line. And so this tends to work better for broadleaf species than it does for our grassy species. That can be a challenge, but it is another tool in the toolbox, right? With a toolbox, it's already relatively limited, but we do see, as that peanut ages and gets a little older, it is more susceptible to flame weeding. There has been some work done, both in Georgia and out of North Carolina. This is actually out of Katie Jennings' group at NC State. They've done some work with the lightning weeder, and I think Carol Johnson's done some work with the electrical weeder here in Georgia, but they've used this electrical weeder in cucumbers, peanuts, and sweet potatoes, and found really good success controlling mainly Palmer amaranth or amaranth species, something that is a little bit taller than that crop canopy. You do see a slight yield reduction as you go later into the season, but they were letting some of those weeds get 2.5 feet tall, right? So that's probably not due to the electrocution of the weed, that's probably due to the competition, right? So, but one of the things I think that we have an opportunity in organics in general, like organic weed management and both peanuts and in vegetables, is there's some new technology out where instead of using an electrified bar, there's basically these fingery plates that go across the ground, right? So we don't necessarily need that difference in height in order to get some weed control. This is a Zasso electric weeder, and so there's some opportunity here, I think, not only for organic peanuts but also some organic vegetables to use that in the field. There's also, if you think about mechanical pulling, there's this mechanical puller here. It runs off of hydraulics. Basically, it's got some tires that kind of rub together, so you can use it to physically pull those weeds instead of sending a hand crew through. And so they actually link up and will pull those weeds and physically remove those weeds. One of the challenges with this is you got to have, and this is a challenge too with the electric weeders, having a tractor big enough with enough horsepower. This basically just runs off of hydraulics, but it does a relatively good job pulling things that are taller than the canopy. But when you get into things like cucumbers, sweet potatoes that are more viney and could potentially get wrapped up in those weeds, you have a higher rate of plant mortality, so it may not actually pay out, right? So you may actually end up hurting the situation more, but it could potentially work for other vegetable and crops like peanuts. We did have reduced peanut yield by 26% compared to hand weeding and 9% greater yield compared to electrical weeding. So maybe an opportunity here, as a type of weed management. I always like to talk about biological control just because I think it's fascinating. Is it viable for organic peanuts or for organic vegetables? Probably not, right? But it's fun to think about, right? So there's actually these Chinese geese. They call them weeder geese. You could basically corral them around the farm, and they do a really great job of eating vegetation. But then you got to not only keep up with everything that's going on the farm, but now you have to look after a bunch of geese, right? So you talk about herding cats. That's easy compared to a bunch of geese, right? So we oftentimes don't use biological control that much for weed control because it takes a really long time. And a lot of our systems, especially our agronomic systems, are not stable enough for us to use biological control. So we see more biological control for weeds in things like rangeland and pasture land and things like that because it is a more stable environment. All right, so this is kind of where I'm about to wrap up and turn it over to Kayla. Hopefully I haven't been too long. Maybe I have been. But there is a large number of OMRI-approved herbicides that are available for use. These are used, across our organic fruit and vegetable systems, but have a place in organic peanut production. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kayla, and she's done some research looking at some of the peanut tolerances for these.
Okay, thank you. So when we started this project, we didn't really have a good answer of what variety should we use. We really wanted to try out these repeated applications of the herbicides. Like he was saying, that critical period of weed control from 3 to 8 weeks. Really the recommendation already is to do repeated weekly, like a Flex-Tine or the Ripper Shank mechanical control. And there's not really a good program for the organic herbicides. So we had the idea of doing a weekly repeated application of the organic herbicides, but we didn't even know if our most common runner type cultivars could handle that because it hasn't been evaluated. We don't know if they'll even survive. Will it reduce yield so much that we get weed control, but we don't actually have a yield at the end? So then does it matter? So we started this in 2022, and then we did it again this year. We're going to do it again next year, just because of the weather that we had last year. But we use 2 different plant oils and then 2 different acids. And how he was talking about just a second ago, we did include vinegar as one of our acids. We wanted to see essentially would they survive, 7 repeated applications of vinegar. And surprisingly, they survive, but I'll get to that in just a second. So we used Ag Optima, Weed Zap, vinegar that we bought at Home Depot, and then cleanup. We did 1, 3, 5, or 7 repeated applications. So we would do 1 application, come back the next week, come back the next week. And so a couple plots had a spray once a week for 7 weeks straight. And that was during that critical period of weed control, which was before lapping. So we made all the concentrations at 5% of the acid or the oil, and we applied it at 50 gallons per acre, pretty much until it was almost dripping wet, the plants were. And then they were made in 7-day intervals. Regardless of weather, we made the application. So if there was rain the next day, we were sticking to that 7-day repeated application. We used 2 normal oleic peanut cultivars and 2 high oleic peanut cultivars because the market for Georgia peanuts is really unique. We have a market for high oleic. You can get a benefit at the buying point, but there's also a really big market for still the normal oleic peanuts. There's always a demand for both. And with new cultivars coming out yearly, some are coming out high oleic, some are coming out normal oleic, so that's just the oil content in the peanut. So we tested Georgia 06G, which is a staple, the most commonly grown peanut cultivar in Georgia, and Georgia 12Y, which was recommended to me by some of my colleagues at UGA to try out with organics because it has such a robust disease package. That's it. And then we did Georgia 16HO and TIF NV High Oleic, which actually came out of USDA recently. So, like I said, we did this 2022 and 2023 in Tifton. And there's 4 replications per treatment, so it was a very, very large test. We did apply irrigation as needed. And for these, because we were trying to determine if these peanut cultivars could even survive these applications, we did apply a pre-herbicide package before we did this trial. So I know these are not organic herbicides, but I am a weed scientist, and all of my research fields are very, very weed dense. So in order to give them a fighting chance and to see if we could get something out of it, we did apply the pre-emergent herbicides for these. And we did visual injury, so we collected that after every application. We have a plant height and width after every application, and then 3 weeks after the final application. And then I'm going to go through the yield here because that's the most important thing. So I just have some pictures. This is cleanup, and you can see it's one application, and then this is a day after we did the 3rd application on the plot to the right. So you can see, the weeds, they already broke through, and it was mostly grasses. So that was the most difficult thing to control, and we even had a pre-package, so keep that in mind. But you can see the burn from this far away, and when you're driving in the field, you really could pick out the plots that had these repeated applications. And then this is 5 applications. It looked very similar to 3. There really wasn't a lot of differences. But then after 7 applications, it started to get a little bit more burn. And I have a close-up picture. It wasn't just like on the right where, you're kind of just seeing a couple spots. It is getting some of the grass, but in the peanut, we're getting that full necrosis of the leaf. So it's not just a little bit of burn and then it's going to come out of it. After 7 applications, I really wasn't sure what the yield was going to look like because the plants were really not recovering from it. So they were having burn on them, and then I'm adding more, they're getting more burn, and it just kind of kept compounding and compounding. But surprisingly, we did have some differences in weather from 22 and 23, and that really affected our yield. So the most important thing out of this slide is on the left is 2022, the right is 2023, and 2023 we had a great year, had a great weather where I'm at, and the yield really reflected that. However, in 2022, 12Y really performed the best. It had the highest yield compared to Georgia 06G, the TIF NV High Oleic, and the Georgia 16HO, which was surprising because it's not a commonly used peanut cultivar, but that's why when I got the recommendation to use it, I was a little skeptical, but I'm really glad that I included it because we had a lot of disease pressure, and it really outperformed that year. But in 2023, I had almost no pressure. It was an excellent year. I didn't have any leaf spot. I really didn't have any disease pressure throughout the whole season. So it still performed well. The other cultivars performed well as well because they weren't being challenged. And then this is the yield, and it is for both of the years, and it's across all of the cultivars. But I wanted to kind of showcase the applications. So the dark blue bar on the far right of each herbicide is 7 applications. I don't know if this has a laser. Yeah. So right here, that's a 7, that's 7, that's 7, and that's 7. So I was surprised at the cleanup, because one application, obviously, as we went down, we got a pretty steep reduction in injury. And then the acetic acid, which is the vinegar, one application, nothing. After that first application, our yield was down across the board. And you could see it visually in the field as well. And it smelled like a red hot with all of them. It was a very strange thing, but as soon as you walked into those plots, you knew you were there with the vinegar. And then we didn't, with the plant oils, and then it didn't really follow a good trend, because in a couple of them, the 3 applications, it reduced it, and then, but I don't know why 7 applications jumped back up in yield. I don't have a good explanation for it. We're going to repeat it next year. We'll see what happens, what kind comes out of that. But so the trends really, it varies by herbicide, which makes this a little more complicated moving forward with the test. But then this is something too, it's just super interesting. Again, this is the 7 applications right here. So obviously when compared, these are the approved herbicides, organic herbicides, and this is vinegar. And it's very clearly a very serious reduction. And I believe moving forward, you're going to have 5 or 7 repeated applications. So that's kind of where we're going to focus for the next part of this study, because 1 and 3 is just not going to give you what you need. And then this is my final slide. This breaks it down. So this is the focus. Having 7 applications, these cultivars are going to have to survive. I think you're going to need it at least 5, more than likely 7. And across the board, again, vinegar just really knocked them all down. But we saw some pretty good, again, with 12Y, we saw some really good benefits and response to it. So I'm excited moving forward with that. And then this is kind of my last slide. So from these results, like I said, we're going to move forward with like 5 and 7 repeated applications. I'm going to take away my and we're going to move it to a full organic only herbicide study. And then currently I also have a greenhouse study running with this exact setup and scenario, repeated applications and rates. And we planted a bunch of different weeds just to see what kind of control we get with species-specific weeds. So we're doing different grasses and different broadleafs that you would see or run into, just to see where we should focus. And then integrating this project with the mechanical control is kind of the next step, but I'd love to kind of hear what is actually needed or wanted moving forward. So that'll be afterward. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
And I want to mention we are actually currently out of time, but we're going to finish the program. But I know some people have to go. If you need to go, you just feel fine and walk out. So that's good. So we're going to continue on.
I'll try to be as brief as possible, and hopefully
Yeah.
we can have a couple minutes of Q&A.
There you go.
Thank you, Kayla. All right, so some of what we're going to say is going to repeat a bit what Nick and Caleb said, because everything he said is absolutely accurate. And when we talk about organic peanuts, organic systems, we're going to talk about weeds. I will try to also kind of cover markets and maybe answer the question, are organic peanuts a good rotational crops? And I think that actually might be a broader conversation among the group. Real quick, GOPA, the Georgia Organic Peanut Association, it's a farmers co-op, it's a marketing co-op, it's technically a 501c nonprofit. The board is all farmers, but what we do is we aggregate peanuts from local farmers, and then we process them and sell them on the market. We were formed in 2019 after about 10 years of farmers and nonprofits working to figure out how can we grow organic peanuts in Georgia. We're the #1 peanut state. Like, why isn't there not a suitable market here? Why can't we do it from a production standpoint? Also, there's a bit of pride. And then also just, I think, intellectual curiosity. Some of the folks were just looking for diversification and looking for ways to manage risk, and they thought organics might be the way to do that. Many thanks also to Georgia Organics, a state nonprofit that helped support us, and we had some grants through Georgia Organics to move forward. One of the things we want to do is offer an opportunity for smaller scale producers. So we're talking about 10 to 20 to 50 acres to potentially grow organic peanuts, and then we could then pool them together and have enough volume. Because that's the question. We always had a chicken and egg problem with peanuts, and that is the processing. So peanuts need a lot of processing. And it's very, it's kind of easier to do an organic vegetable in many ways because maybe your end market doesn't need the processing. Here, we've got to take it to a buying point potentially, which if that buying point's not integrated within the sheller, then that buying point might have to be certified, which is wild because they don't even do anything to it. Then the processor has to be certified, and then if you get from the sheller, if there's any issues with quality, then you have to take it to a blancher. They have to be certified. And then from there, you need to take it to cold storage. They have to be certified. And so the sheller has been really the biggest issue with all this because peanuts there's been so much consolidation in the peanut industry that there's very few independent shellers out there. So, we have been kind of bumping around trying to find someone who would sheller peanuts, but also the sheller said, well, you need the volume. So our opportunity, our obligation was then to bring enough farmers together than to have the volume to justify it for the sheller for their costs. And we finally hit that in 2019. We can talk a little bit more about that and where things stand going forward, but we have been producing certified organic peanuts for the market since 2019. I'll just go ahead and say this outright first. The demand is very large. The demand is incredible. And there's the demand both in terms of, I was going to say 20 truckloads a month, and that could be one buyer. It's unbelievable how many people want certified organic peanuts. We obviously cannot hit that amount. Then the people who want a 5-pound bag of certified organic peanuts, the retail customers, I can't even tell you how many emails we get on that. And of course, we don't have labor to be able to do that. But all I'm saying is that the demand is kind of incalculable, and we get constant emails that we just can't even address. Most of our customers are going to be small artisan peanut butter manufacturers that we didn't even know existed either, that are all around the country. We get a lot of demand from Europe, but our aflatoxin does not meet European standards, so we can't send it to Europe right now. Aflatoxin is another question to talk about with peanuts, but we probably won't have time to get into that right now. Just real quick, that's Georgia Grinders. They're an organic peanut manufacturer in Atlanta, and they've been a customer of ours. Okay, so I'll move forward, and we'll just talk about a little bit of weeds, and then everything they said is exactly correct. The yield, 2,000 to 4,500 pounds an acre, is about where we are, and it just depends on weather and germination. It's very important. Everybody does 16HO or 12Y, but getting those peanuts out of the ground at a good time is very, very important, and they're not treated, so that we have a lot of issues with diseases in the fields. Probably a lighter, sandier soil, you're going to be more successful because you might have fewer disease pests there, but the other issue is that rain. We cannot get a year in which things make sense on a rain standpoint. And these lighter, this is actually a little heavier soil, to tell you the truth, in Camilla. But the sooner it dries out, the sooner you can get in the field, the better things will work for your organic system. Okay, I'm going to do a couple. Let's not worry about that. I'm going to do a couple slides about just the weeds. And then we can talk a little bit maybe about market for a minute. But okay, so here's the peanut field, right? These are actually certified organic peanuts. This is in Plains. We won't list all the species. This is another certified organic peanut field in Plains. The big issue is exactly what we said, and in many respects to Dr. Carol Johnson, who's done a ton of work on this, is that you got to get in the field almost immediately after planting, and you've got to just weed. We'll look at a couple of our tools, but you cannot let anything get started, because once you get started, they'll probably get ahead of you, and the rain has prevented us constantly from getting in on a regular standpoint. Also, most of our farmers are not full-time certified organic producers. They have other businesses, enterprises. So probably if you were professional certified organic and that's all you did, you would probably plant on time. Yet we have yet to have farmers that can plant on time. And so we're always pushing it. We're pushing planting dates and we're pushing harvest dates. So we've had, we're pulling peanuts out in the last couple of years where there's been a frost on them. So we lose some yield on that too. Okay, so anyway, and we can talk about some finances too. So there's a peanut field that had to be abandoned. Here's another peanut field near Statesboro, and you talk about nutsedge, and nutsedge can be a major issue. I was on a SARE grant with nutsedge looking at Vidalia onions and trying to use a peanut digger. No one's really tried that on in a kind of system-wide in a peanut field like that. And this is just an abandonment. And I guess the nutsedge also has this disease that eventually gets it and kills it, but by this time it's too late. So some of our weeds, Texas panicum, other weeds that you're not going to see in a conventional peanut field. And now these generally don't affect yield too much, and the amazing thing about peanuts is they're incredibly resilient. You know, Kayla, your research is, if this is true, that we can use a chemical on 5 applications, it would change the game in terms of also a financial standpoint, because hand labor is really like, you know, gets you, people would love to have a chemistry that they could, you know, our farmers talk about, because many of them are older, said, you know, back in the 70s there were the good chemicals where you could spray the peanuts and they would disappear underground and come back up after 3 or 4 days. Now those weren't organic, but you know, the peanut is an incredibly resilient crop. All right, so just real quick, this picture on the left, this is from a USDA bulletin, in which, you know, they're using a tine weeder, and actually in that bulletin, they crisscross the entire field. There's nothing that is not touched by the weeder. And so even the peanuts are being disturbed and harmed in ways, but peanuts, that's fine. In many ways, we're doing the same things that has been, you know, a kind of mechanical cultivation practice. And I also think, just on a broader level, you know, somebody needs to keep this kind of flame alive, right? I mean, what happens when the chemistries in conventional peanuts are no longer effective? Someone needs to understand still how we can grow peanuts and grow vegetables and food from a mechanical standpoint. So let's see here real quick. This is just a quick, let's see if it'll work. So this is a field day we had in 2014 with Georgia Organics. And this is, as Nick said too, we have to often replant. Plant population is really important, but you can see that weeder, that tine weeder just goes right across all those peanuts and nobody worries about it. Then we do sweeps. Then we go to hand weeding, hand labor, and that can be $400 an acre sometimes. It just depends on the year and what's going on. Here's the lightning weeder. I don't have a picture of it actually. I mean, you can work on the video. As Nick said too, it mainly gets the taller weeds, but Palmer amaranth is an amazing, amazing plant. And you can burn it down, and it can look like it's dead, and it lays over, and then it'll come back up in a week or two. And because also it'll probably rain 2 days later, like that night, and there's moisture in the ground to kind of bring it back. Eugenol, we did some work with that. Not, you know, fine, but I think that, Kayla, your research, we could not look at it in terms of application rates and maybe kind of, you know, what's great about field work and the farm versus also the research, which I think we need to combine, is that, you know, how do we also make it practical from the farmer side to be able to do it? Because they have so many things that are pulling on them. So, you know, this is how you know you're looking at an organic field. If this is definitely not organic. If you see anything, everybody here knows about organics, right? That's why we're here. This is not an organic field. All right, so anyway, I will stop right there. This is our website. If you have any questions, I'm kind of the outreach arm and do programs. My email info@organicpeanuts. That's my phone number. And then we can talk about, like, is it a viable? Just real quick. Okay. I think one thing organic peanuts need, and we need in the South for organic systems, is we need good rotations. And so we're still working on the rotation for peanuts. Frankly, we don't have a great market for organic corn in the Southeast. When we've approached people about selling organic corn, we have to ship it to Kentucky. And lately, with shipping costs, that's been like not feasible. We've done some sunflowers, but the sunflowers, the price hasn't been right either. So we need another summer rotation crop, especially a grass would be wonderful to be able to pull this together. There's a dark market for soybeans, but then you start to figure out, like, then your rotation gets a little bit longer because you don't want to do legumes so close to each other. But we've seen some, which is interesting and not really under the spirit of organics, is that, well, we'll cut timber and use, a new land, or, and then, your everything from your organisms in your soil to your soil health to your topsoil, right, is gone. And we don't have a lot of topsoil, but we're definitely like tilling a lot, and like we don't necessarily want to convert new land just for organics. We want to make sure we can get a system together. There is a bit of a challenge right now with processing because we're not vertically integrated, and it feels like every year we have to come up and figure out like who's going to be the reliable partner to process runner peanuts. We're still working on that, and that's our responsibility. But I think that if anybody wanted to have a conversation, also if anybody had a lot of money, we would be happy to talk to you about how to make this work. And right now we're focused in Southwest Georgia, but we have peanuts in South Georgia and North Florida. The North Florida growers have done actually probably better than the South Georgia growers. There may be a better opportunity, to be honest with you, in a state like North Carolina. Somebody that already has maybe a more robust organic industry, and then also maybe look at Virginia peanuts. Maybe look at something that doesn't necessarily need to be shelled. But I think the end of the game, my takeaway is that we still have these challenges, but the market is absolutely there. The money is about equal to what you would make from a conventional side. You're going to have 4,000 pounds an acre at the best, which is going to be maybe half of the best conventional yield. However, crop insurance is a wonderful thing, and it can kind of make up for it. And you also make about twice. The contract is twice what you would make from a conventional crop, so it balances out. And then the last thing I would just say is, and someone might want to address this: if you are doing vegetables in the system, is there an allergy risk with growing peanuts in the vegetable system? And I don't know.